You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxie Mooney. Welcome back to the show, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with two folks who are the senior leaders of NeedleSmart, the CEO, Cliff Kirby, and Michael Barron, the COO. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks, Dr. Roxie.
All right, which one's who? Just to kind of set this up for our audience today.
I'm Cliff. And obviously I'm Michael.
Awesome. All right, so let's start off the conversation by telling our audience a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating these days.
Okay, so I'll lead off. I'm an engineer by background. I'm an automotive design engineer by training. I spent 15 years across various industries designing, working and leading programs of anything that had wheels or tracks. And that led me into the marketplace of dealing with life safety products and medical products, which is what really brought me to the space where NeedleSmart starts its journey. So I'm an innovator by training and naturally inquisitive by nature. So that's a little bit about me.
Great.
So I complement that in the sense that I started my career in finance, managing portfolios for sovereign wealth funds, high net worth individuals, family offices, and then transitioned after 2 decades to work with individuals within those portfolios on what I'll call their second journey after they had been successful in trying to figure out what they were going to do. And that really was deeply ensconced in entrepreneurialism. And that's either bringing strategy to the table or the combination of strategy, human capital, and financial capital to solve interesting problems. And that's where effectively Cliff and I met.
So how did NeedleSmart start? I mean, you guys have very diverse non-traditional healthcare backgrounds, which we see a lot, especially in recent years. So how did NeedleSmart start?
Easy for you to say.
Say that 3 times.
So I think not coming from a healthcare background is probably one of the most useful tools we've got in our toolkit.
Agreed.
I come from a world whereby efficiency is key, return on investment is paramount, and adding value is something that's always in conversation. And the medical marketplace has relied for many, many years on people and bringing in more and more people to carry out the same tasks. And many processes, including vaccination, haven't changed for many, many years. So NeedleSmart in its entirety starts life as a hardware solution, really recognizing that at this moment in time, we still, even though there are many solutions out there, we still take a hypodermic needle and a syringe, which is plastic and metal. We use it, we throw it into a plastic container, and in most cases, that's incinerated. And in a world whereby, there are billions and billions of ideas and programs dealing with global warming, that's one that just doesn't get touched. Then you start to look to a wider audience in terms of not just the disposal cycle, but you think about the efficiencies on offer. And COVID really paints a clear picture of that, is that we've built a software and hardware platform that addresses the core problem, which is the operational efficiency and burnout. And that is speaking to generations that have never really changed that process. So what you see today is no different than what you saw 100 years ago. And as a result of that, it's not a process, it's a series of singular events. So we recognized that if we can innovate into that space and offer back really time and take away burden from healthcare workers, we're going to bring something very powerful to the marketplace.
Awesome. So who is your target audience in the healthcare sector? Who are you selling to?
Yeah, our target market is primary care clinics, pharmacies, government agencies who are seeing vaccination throughput regularly in their businesses.
So so how has this journey been for you as a startup entrepreneur?
From what perspective do you want to come at it from a because we're unique in many respects, but I think I think generally speaking, it's we're an organization that is endeavoring to do very big things with an incredibly small but talented team. So
Yep.
it's a journey that is obviously 1,000 steps, but those steps are going up the side of a mountain in bare feet. But at the same time, they're exciting steps.
Hmm.
Each one that we take is just one step further forward towards a number of strategic markers that we've set out in front of us.
Yeah, I'll add to. Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that to go back to where you started a couple of minutes ago about coming from non-traditional backgrounds,
Hmm.
I think that all of us believe that's additive in this instance. And I think
Yeah.
that one of the things that is most exciting is that when you're looking to bring forward structural change, you know that you're not going to do it alone. First of all, no entrepreneurial journey is ever alone. But in the
Hmm.
scope of what we're talking about at NeedleSmart, it's really about community building. And that's a phrase that is oft overused and perhaps misunderstood. But in our case, we recognize that to make a sea change from a workflow standpoint, to bring together and codify a process, as Cliff rightly said, is a series of loosely connected events surrounding injections and vaccinations. You need to bring into the conversation and into the tent. You need to bring in healthcare professionals. You need to bring in technology professionals. You need to bring in government officials and agencies. Everybody needs to understand the depth, scope, and breadth of this problem to be able to collaborate. And that's really, I think, one of the most exciting things about that is that while we're endeavoring to do big things, we
Yeah.
know we know that we're not doing it alone. And sometimes the entrepreneurial journey can seem lonely.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and I brought that question up because of your background, one being non-healthcare, but also being much larger organizations. When you're talking about Rolls-Royce or Caterpillar, it's very different developing products in a large organization like that versus when you're a startup and you're trying to raise money and you're wearing multiple hats. And there's a lot of advantages to that, but it's also a different world, as well as what you touched on where with NeedleSmart, where you're doing something that's revolutionary, that's never been done before. When you're bringing an innovation like that to market, it's very different than if you're just bringing something that has like this little slight incremental improvement versus really trying to transform how healthcare professionals deliver injection therapy.
I think that had we started with a medical background, we would have fallen into the trap to believe that this is the way it's always been done, or we you can't do it like that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's really why it takes somebody from outside to understand the full scope of the problem. You do this show regularly, so it's no surprise to you and your audience that we have a tremendous shortage of healthcare workers, frontline clinicians, and
Yeah.
because they are truly underwater every day, to think about what could be 2, 5, 10 years from now is really out of the realm of reasonableness.
Everywhere. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of add to that as well. If you look at how the corporate world deals with product development and product launch, there are a lot of differences. Obviously, you've not got a bank balance, or you've got a budget, but your budget is going to be far smaller. It's going to be an ever changing budget because you're constantly fundraising, but the principles don't change. The steps that you need to take, the way in which you need to attack the problem, don't move. And I guess the exciting component of that is that when you take that knowledge base and you move it into a different arena, um, you can really get behind that, and you know where you are in the process. So even when you feel like you're staring into the abyss because you're having a dark day for whatever reason, at least you know where you are. And to Michael's point, then that's when the community really becomes important to you, because it only takes one meeting during that day to transform that conversation and to transform the way the mood is going.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Would you say that in your experience, that because of the challenges with the human capital shortages, that the primary care physicians and other entities that you had named are more open to technology enabling some of the care to be able to be more scalable and more intelligent?
Do you want?
Yeah, real quickly, I think that clinicians are tired of being forced to be administrators, and that is no slight against recordation, administration, and management. It's just a function that nobody gets into healthcare as a clinician to be an administrator,
Yeah.
and the problems the problem that we keep seeing again and again is that the administrative burden is put on to clinicians rather than thinking, how do we make their job as easy as possible, right, to get the best outcome. You can't have great patient care without great clinical care. And we started this journey from a clinician first focus. And because of that, when we have tested or trialed or worked in collaboration with different clinical groups to give us feedback and to work with the technology,
Hmm.
it's unanimous, right? If you can walk into it, if you as a clinician, if you can have a patient walk in pre-registered with a QR code, and all you're doing is scanning their information, bringing them onto the screen, verifying who they are, injecting the patient, destroying the needle, and that record is then moved into an EMR, EHR, it's sent to a patient on their phone, and that has required next to zero keystrokes. Every clinician is signing up for this, right?
Oh, happy day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of just explore a little bit of that journey on how you were involving the clinicians in the product development or even in the launch process. I talk a lot about co-creation or, design thinking and how more and more organizations are finding success with evolving the customers in that process. What has that experience been like for you guys?
I think let me take that one. Right. The first thing is that any product development is colouring in within the lines. You can't start expanding your reach or recreating what you believe you started out to do, because the moment you put a lot of brain power to a problem, you will get multiple solutions to that problem. And then you place that in the hands of engineers. Well, engineers love to solve a problem time and time and time again. So you can end up with perpetual motion and no solution. So
Yeah.
I think from our perspective, we've leaned on clinical feedback at pivotal moments. We've brought people into the business to support us for key parts of that program, but it was
Yep.
important to us that we brought something to them first of all. So having a show and tell is a really important part of our process.
Hmm.
There are 7 steps to launch a product in almost every case, and for us on that journey, we only wanted to bring people in or continue to bring people in and have the support at the pivotal moments, because what we don't want to do is seek counsel from a niche market. So if, for example, you bring someone in who has a specialty and their specialty is such a small piece of market, it's the most important market that they'll deal in. Um, but for us, if we focus on that tiny piece of that pie, then as we look at the wider opportunity and how we can really scale and make changes and make substantive transformation, we're almost certainly stepping onto the wrong boat and sailing down the river in the wrong direction. So it's
Yeah.
important to take counsel and engage people, not just with the right mindset, but also with the skill set of the market you need to hear about.
Mhm.
Because the medical market's vast and there are such a huge range of treatment pathways and different ways of administering that. It's very easy to find yourself going down one rabbit hole only to come out of it to go down another one.
Well, and this is kind of what I was getting to earlier, where I think that you have like a huge advantage because of your background being out of healthcare and so much experience with product launches in the past, of being able to, dance that delicate balance between how are you leveraging your internal R&D team to innovate something revolutionary, but also balancing that with customer feedback along the way. And that's something that I see as a common pitfall that healthcare innovators fall into, where they're either completely excluding customers from the process because they are the experts and they have all the answers and they know exactly what they want to build, or they're relying almost solely on customer feedback, and they end up exactly what you just said, building something for a very specific use case that doesn't necessarily give them a viable business to bring to market.
Yeah, and that you're 100% correct. And also to add to that is the quality assurance in healthcare is ultimately the delivery of the care to that patient. So it's a very individualized process. So in the world that we live in the world that we operate in, that quality assurance, that credible feedback can come from anyone. It's
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter to us whether we're speaking to a hospital porter, for example, who's had 5 needle stick injuries as a result of transporting waste, right the way through to a chief pharmacist who's got responsibility of 5,000 pharmacies and understands the intrinsic burnout problems they're seeing as an organization, because all of that is valuable feedback to the sector that we want to operate in. And you've got to
Sure.
be able to take that. The advice is equally as valid from the guy who's taking out the waste to the guy who's in control of 5,000 pharmacies.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of what you guys have indicated, there's no shortage of problems in healthcare, right, to solve for. there's plenty opportunity for entrepreneurs that want to solve some healthcare problems. How did you all go about identifying the specific problem that you were going to solve for, and in validating that there was a market that was willing to pay to solve that problem?
So, the interesting dichotomy over that question is that COVID has been probably the biggest enabler of that solution for us. The
Yeah.
inevitable consequence of the medical market was always going to be that clinicians would reach breaking point because they are relied on to do everything. So,
Hmm.
with no level of easing in from an efficiency standpoint. But what COVID did for the marketplace that we now serve really was to put all hands on deck, and when all hands were on deck, make those deck hands work 24/7, and then realize that they still couldn't bail out the water; the ship was still sinking. And
Hmm.
that analogy really paints the picture of clinicians who are already overworked being further overworked, which creates a mindset change. There is a sea change in the mentality of the clinician, but also there is a sea change in the mentality of the management, because what they then see is they see their clinicians either leaving the industry or retiring early, or they can't get qualified professionals through quick enough, which has a
Yeah.
substantial and significant effect on their business.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so you mentioned the 7 steps in every product launch. Identify what those are, or share those with us for our audience that aren't familiar with that framework or model.
Yeah, it's probably longer than this podcast, but
Oh,
I'll,
can we get the clip notes?
yeah, really simply, you have to be able to clearly identify what it is you need, and then that will come from whichever channel that comes from. You then need to put it into a specification and build that specification so it's clear and simple. You then need to bring things into a design phase where you're innovating your ideas, you're bringing it forward to a place where you need to down select. So now we've covered 3 steps. I normally spend about 3 hours lecturing on this, but we'll give you it in 2 minutes. Um,
Yep, yep.
then you will move into a phase where you need to lock down your solution, because if you don't lock it down, if you don't fix it tight, you'll find yourself in a place where your R&D specialists, who are your greatest allies, become your greatest frailty, because they'll never stop innovating. Because let me tell you, you think a wheel is brilliant, an engineer thinks a wheel can easily be reinvented.
Right.
Okay? So then
Yeah.
you'll take your lockdown solution, you'll move it into a qualitative testing phase, and bring on your supply chain, so that now you are not just proving your principle, but you're actually proving it in your marketplace, so that you've got both place, product, and quantitative feedback. Your next step is to build some sort of soft launch, so you've got some volume to test against, because often you won't see a problem in one solution, but you put 1,000 out there, and all of a sudden you'll start to see the problems
Mhm.
materialize. Murphy's law is a real thing, and then the final step is launch that product, build your supply chain around it, build your distribution, your network, and then launch. So that's a whirlwind tour, by the way.
Well, and it makes it seem like it's so easy. We just follow these 7 steps, and there we go. We're solving all these problems, and building these successful businesses. And in both of your experiences, what are some of the pitfalls, and maybe a story or two of how of a pitfall that you guys have encountered, whether it's been with Needle Smart or not, and how you've overcome that.
I think that one of the pitfalls that entrepreneurs make is one that we try to counsel our kids on, which is that you got to seek feedback. You have to be coachable, right? You're never about, there's no possible way that you can have all of it figured out, especially when you're trying to do something that's never been done. So I think that within that, we have to be open, and have created an environment where, and a corporate culture that we are constantly looking for what have we missed, and how do we get better information along this journey. And so when we go back earlier to the community setting or the community
Yep.
example, for us that means both a dialogue and feedback and information flow with lawmakers, means it with government agencies, means it with healthcare systems and providers, means it on the design side, it means it on the technology and the software side. So there's never a shortage of things that you need further information, you need further guidance on. And
Yep.
for us, that comes at a professional settings. It comes at working with collaboratively with strategic partners and building partnerships with really clear outcomes. And I think that when you do that, you can get to a place with your suppliers, with your partners, with agencies and legislators, where you're talking honestly to each other, right?
Hmm.
You're looking to solve a common problem. And I think that you talked earlier, you alluded to the fact that many entrepreneurs fall in love with their idea and they don't need any feedback or counsel from the people and the ultimate market that they're going to wind up selling to. That's a huge mistake.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I've also seen, and heard a lot in both the clients that I've worked with, and stories that I've been a part of, is it sounds like there's also an issue with health innovators right now really struggling with. I have a board of directors that are giving me guidance. I have all of these, advisors. I have my customers. I have my gut instincts and my core team. And, especially when it's in the early stage, when there's so much ambiguity, and in really, whoever I spoke to last has a very different direction or guidance that they're giving me than the next person or the next person. So what's kind of like your rule of thumb in really being able to make those choices and those decisions that can make a difference on whether the company survives or thrives? When are you going with your instincts because you know that it is the right thing to do, and you're doing something that's never been done before, versus the board of director that's giving you that guidance that says, no, you need to go after this market right now.
I think that when it comes to a board, either directors or advisors or a group like that, you need the right person, right? Not the right now person. And I think that being really deliberate about who sits in those roles helps to
Yeah.
solve for that problem. You need people. I like to think of, and Cliff and I talk about this, that we have a rule that people who sit in those roles with respect us, they need to be triple threats, right? They need to have deep, siloed experience in an area that's going to move forward and help the company. They already need to have board experience. This isn't the place, the environment, or the time for them to be on their first board. And they need to
Yes.
have a network, and that network can help them problem solve as well as us. So when we're talking about that issue, I think you need to be
Yeah.
really deliberate and thoughtful about how you're going to select individuals and construct a group that's going to be able to give you specific feedback. People who have deep experience and have served in roles like this before generally can start to very quickly work well together.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, give us an update of where you are with the company now, and your commercialization, and what's next? What's on the horizon in 2024 for NeedleSmart?
Okay, so we've done something really different as a business model. Michael and I were brought together by a former congressman, a gentleman called Chris Carney, and we were brought together on a screen some 3 years ago now. And within 15 minutes, we knew that we were going to work together on this, and that led us forward into what became a fully formed US government strategy that Chris actually spearheads for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we are the first American startup. I maybe surprised if that was the case, but I'm almost certain that we're the first UK based startup to have had such a large and well rounded and well understood government strategy on Capitol Hill. So we have
Mm-hmm.
substantive support, which has led to some work coming towards us with the Veterans Administration and community. That will be our
Yep.
first piece of work. That's we've worked hard for 2 years to get to this point. It was a calculated risk, but one that we were very prepared to take. And maybe your point over board members is quite valid there, because I'm sure that a very atypical board member would have had a very different view than we had. Um,
Yeah.
and that will lead us into further public work through 2025, at which point in time we'll also move into our private marketplace. We're very deliberate and cautious how we move. We're not slow in any way, but equally, we don't want to take on more than we can chew. And we've become very exciting very quickly in most people's eyes, but in our eyes, that's not the case. We've worked incredibly hard behind the scenes to get to this point.
I think that requires a lot of discipline, and like you said, deliberateness. A lot of the health innovators that I come across, have such a great urgency to steal as much market share as they possibly can, especially with a lot of like AI solutions, that there's just kind of this urgency of like, if not now, when, the window of opportunity is closing. And that often I find can also be the demise of the company, because they're taking on too many customers or too many different customers, and it ends up jeopardizing the success of the company, versus what you just suggested.
I think you have two things there, right? One is that apparently now everyone's an AI expert, and you and I and Cliff probably go to the same medical conferences, health conferences, and 90 out of 100 startup companies are doing something with generative AI. And there's
Yep.
most certainly a lot of heat and not a lot of light around that subject, and that's probably an episode for another podcast. But
Yeah, let's do
talk,
it.
when you talk about mission drift and you talk about shiny ball syndrome, right? It's easy.
Mhm.
It's easy to be distracted, and as an entrepreneur with a good idea, a lot of opportunities are going to be put
Yeah.
in front of you, and we see that every day. We have countries and different nations calling us up to talk about a turnkey solution, but we're not in the right place, and that isn't the right decision for us. And so I think that when Cliff
Yeah.
talks about being deliberate and cautious, right, rather than slow, that's the recipe for success. We could very easily get into a situation where we're tripping over catastrophic success at that point.
Yeah, I think I'd also add to that is that part of that failure happens because it's driven by people behind the scenes. So if you have the wrong backing, if you have the wrong investors, if you've got the people who don't understand your vision or understand you, you can
Yeah.
find yourself in a conversation whereby I can tell you now, every single product is always late to market. Nothing arrives on time. So, but you may have an investor who's, you're 6 months late and they're chasing that down. And then all of a sudden they're talking about, well, now we just need to sell. And maybe it's not the right time, or maybe the product's had to change direction for whatever reason. But you're now
Yeah.
forced down that rabbit hole again. Now you're down a different rabbit hole. and you're burning capital, chasing after something that you know is not going to be the right outcome for you. But the guy behind you might be saying, but if we get just so many $1 million of sales, we'll be able to get another funding round. And at that point in time, you've catastrophically changed the way in which your business is going to move.
Yeah. And that's where I go back to what you guys were saying about the community and the partnerships, not just for your customers and your go-to-market, but what you guys were talking about as far as the board and the advisors and who's speaking into you, and making sure that there's alignment with those vision, those values, and that goals that really does create that alignment on the speed of which you're penetrating the market as well. Yeah. And where. So as we start to wrap up here, is there anything else that you would want to share with our audience?
No, I mean, I think firstly, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a great conversation from our point of view. The NeedleSmart journey, while it sounds like it's exciting now, it's only getting more exciting. So there's going to be some big news coming out over the next few months over where we're up to and what happens next. But okay. From our point of view, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
I think you said it all.
All right. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about NeedleSmart or doing business with you in the future?
Sure. Yeah, you can find us at needlesmart.com or at NeedleSmart, LinkedIn, Twitter, Cliff Kirby, Michael Barron. We're all there. So look forward to connecting with your audience that way.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Michael Roxie.
Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.